Buongiorno.
Ah, buongiorno,
Uh,
principessa.
see, my name is Nikki Trubitskaya, and I'm here today with Hani and Eddie.
Right, I'm Eddie. That's honey.
That's Hani. And thank you. Thank you very much, Eddie, to
My
join
pleasure.
us today. And we have little with Zoom, but we did very well at the end.
Yeah, it worked out. Look,
It did work
honey's
out.
already bored. Did you see honey just yawned?
She's she's ready to go. I know because her time was all right. Sit down, sweetheart. She's never gonna let me. You know what I want to ask you. Your childhood.
Born in Brooklyn, and I was the first child of my very young parents. And they did the best they could at the beginning, and then I had a sister 4 years later, and we were having good old time in Brooklyn. It was a very good neighborhood. There was a lot of wonderful people, and it was a nice mix, and everyone looked out for each other. It was very, very, like, it was like your little hometown on one street in Brooklyn, and it was really nice. And I was good in school. I liked school. I was a good student, very similar to you. And I had a lot of fun. But the real change happened in a crazy year of 1969, because that was the year of the moon landing. That was the year that they created Monty Python. They created Sesame Street. Frank Sinatra sang "My Way." There was a million things happening in 1969. And the other one is that my parents were getting divorced. My mom had met another man who was fantastic. And he was of one religion and my mother was of a different, and the families were fighting, and they loved each other so much that instead of putting up with the fighting, we moved to Florida because that's where my aunt was. So we got away from all the BS, and we moved to Florida. And it was hard because you think everything is picture perfect, like you have a father and a mother and a sister and school, and you think, okay, I'm like everybody else. But all the stuff was going on that we didn't really know about. When you get married so young, like 18, 19, like they were, they had a good time, and then they grew apart, and there's nothing wrong with that, and they were better off separated, and they did that. And my mom, my stepfather, and my sister and I, my pregnant mom at the time, we all moved to Florida. So what a difference to go from really great neighborhood to incredible schools to very cosmopolitan New York thinking, to Florida, which was beautiful, very racist, very small-minded in most cases. The school that I first went to was really not a challenge. It was a big difference for me. And started making friends, but at the beginning, it was just, very minimum friends and going to the beach. So it was okay. And it was a transition for me. And then, when I went to high school, the schools was a little bit better, smarter, better teachers. My stepfather got very sick very
Um,
quickly. He got cancer in 1974. So we'd only known him 5 years, barely, because we kind of really started knowing him beginning of 1970. So I'm the oldest. There's five of us now. My mom had three kids with my stepfather and twins in 1971. And then my baby brother, it's not a baby, now 1974. So we had this family. And then when my little brother was born, the littlest, my stepfather got cancer. So it was all of a sudden I'm the oldest and I'm in charge. I was about 15.
15. Wow.
And yeah, so it was like being a parent when I was a child. And I worked many jobs. Uh, I did what I had to do. And I just we lived our
And
life, had no choice to survive.
and then you moved to New York.
Right away, what happened
Mm.
was I had to go to college, and
Uh-huh.
he recommended a small school in Boston called Emerson. because I wanted to do radio, and I went there, and right away my first friends, we formed a comedy group because we were funny together. I never thought I'd do anything like that, and it was really successful right away. And we were, it was we were in college, so it wasn't really like we were stars, but in the college we were like stars, because we put out good product and people like to laugh. It's very sexy to laugh, and we had a really great scenario there. And we created a comedy writing department at the college that had
Mm.
before. And it opened up the doors for many young comedians like Bill Burr and David Cross and Laura Keitlinger and Jennifer Kirkman, Jennifer, what's her name? I can't. All of a sudden, I love Jen Kirkman for sure. Jennifer Coolidge is the other one. I mean, there
Uh-huh.
was incredible people who went right after us because we had created this scenario for them to be part of. So yeah, so there's a long version. And then after I graduated college, I moved back to New York because my father lived in New York. I wasn't that close to him. And my sister had moved from Florida to New York. And and my two best friends from college had left and gone to New York. So the next thing for me to do was to get out of Boston, and which was also very racist, and moved to New York, where although there's always racist people everywhere, it was a place that was more open, no bullshit, very honest, and it was the transition. And now I've been in New York pretty much for 40 something years. And I lived in 1987. I lived both in New York and Los Angeles for a while, for like,
Mm-hmm.
and then I moved back to New York in 1990 for good. And I started a comedy club in 1984 in the Village called the Paper Moon. It was Adam Sandler's first place to work. Wendy Liebman, Colin Quinn, Susie Essman were all coming in, Judy Gold. We were all kids together, and we were putting on a show, and it went very, very well. Eventually became the Boston Comedy Club, but originally it was the Paper Moon. And I started doing well myself and doing some television. So that's when I started going to Los Angeles, and then I go there to work because it was, smart of me to go work both in New York and LA. On August 23rd, 1970, I moved to Florida. And I remember the date because I started a diary. And in big letters and numbers, it said August 23rd, 1970. And then after all that time living in Florida and then college in Boston, I moved back to New York, and I looked at my watch and it was August 23rd, 1980. So I moved back to New York 10 years to the day that I left it. Pretty crazy.
How you started in late night?
Well, what had happened was when I was in LA, I had a college friend who had got me a job as a warm-up comedian for this kid show called Saved by the Bell comic. That's pretty much a big.
Absolutely, yeah.
They really, I was in their way. They they wanted to see all the stars of the show. It was a really young teenage audience, and there was only like one adult in the crowd that I could play to. But I was, like I said, it was a babysitting job, but it paid money, and I was broke. And then when I moved back to New York, I got a few warm-up jobs, including the Dana Carvey show. And then that didn't last very long. So some of the people from the Dana Carvey show had moved to different jobs, and Louis C.K. moved over to the Letterman show, and Letterman was looking for a new warm-up comedian, and Louis recommended me, and I had a 6-week trial period, and it lasted 17 years.
Wow. Did you ever perform? Like, did you book yourself on the show? Were can you do that?
Oh, I could book
So you
myself
were like a booker, right, for the show or warm up?
in
Uh-huh.
2000, in the year 2001. I started booking the show, the comics on the show. And it was interesting. They I'd already been on the show as a guest, and they were going to let me do it every year at the beginning, just like if there's a few comedians that get to do it every year, which is kind of cool. And but I had to go through the producers and I couldn't just put myself on TV and go, okay, I'm on tonight. You
Yeah.
know, that would have been too much. But yeah, so I had to go through the producers and they had to go over my set and they, just like I had to do with the other comedians. And then after a while, we didn't have that many comedian spaces. So I stopped doing it as a guest on the show for a while. Maybe like 8 or 9 years, I didn't get on the show. And Letterman said to me, "Well, how come you're not on the show?" And I go, "Well, there's too many other people that I'm trying to get spots for, and it's hard." And he said, "No, you work here. You get on the show." So I did it 10 times all those
Nice
years.
guy. So you're telling me like some stories from your, booking days, right? All the celebrities you work with. Tell us something that, you can share, some insights.
I would never tell secrets. When I was a kid growing up and I watched television, I would see these comedians and it inspired me to do comedy as well. Like I saw George Carlin and I wanted to do comedy. So I wanted to do that for other kids. So I got George Carlin and the Smothers Brothers and Roseanne Barr and on and on and on, names of famous comedians to come on the show and do stand up. And then and it was really cool. And also at the same time, I had to find young comics who were about to break. People like Mike Birbiglia and Kumail Nanjiani and Hannibal Buress and all these people. I worked on with them to sort of give them, get them ready for their first television spot. A couple of people had gone over to other shows after I was working with them, but they always came back to Letterman, and it was kind of a cool, scenario to be able to look at talent and know that they're going to do well, to see that they have that spark, that they have that soul, and then you watch their careers go well, and you feel proud. It's very, very nice. As far as secrets, it's no secrets. The key really is sometimes, you have to find someone last minute because, say, a guest couldn't make it, the airplane was delayed or something, and I always had comedians ready to go, uh, which was pretty good. And and sometimes those comedians would be, so nerve-wracking because you're performing in front of 5 million people on television, and you're like, oh my God, and I hope I do well. And so, there was a lot of being a psychologist and a therapist at the same time with my job. People like bouncing off the walls. I remember Roseanne Barr hadn't done stand-up on television in like 15 years or more than that or something. And I convinced her to do it because she was she's a great stand-up comedian. And I never seen someone so nervous before she went out. And then she went on stage and she was smooth, and got so many laughs. And I could just see how happy she was because the feeling, as you know, from doing stand-up is one of the greatest in the world.
How for young comedian, for example, like me, to start in the show and then being booked somewhere? Because this is also the biggest question, like how you get booked on these big talk shows. Do you have a manager? Do you have to know people, or how it working?
The one thing I do know about most any job, and especially this one, it's who you know. I mean, I wouldn't have got the Letterman job if Louis didn't recommend me. Most likely I wouldn't have got the job. And it's the same thing in most jobs. You working in construction, and your father says, "Well, I know my uncle or my cousin is very talented." That's how you do it. So in comedy, it works the same way. It's how you get that. So what you do is when you're coming up, if you put the work in, people around you notice, because if you put the work in, you get better at it. You can't help it. Comedy is one of those industries that the more you do it, the better you get. You can't teach comedy, but you can. Stage time is the best teacher in the world. Get on stage. That's the most important, because that's the best teacher. Like some people in the industry don't realize that the older you get, the better you get. Some of these comedians like Don Rickles and Phyllis Diller, they're in their 90s doing comedy, and they're great at it because the more you do it, the better you get. So although it's very smart and savvy to find young, talented people, and keep the wheels going around. It's also important not to throw away the people who've been doing it for 40 to 50 years or so, because those are the people that, you want to see, you want to aspire to. If you could be as funny and as powerful as Lily Tomlin or Jonathan Winters, or these old names that were when I was a kid. You watch them on television, they make you laugh, and it's not because they've been doing it for a week and they're young and handsome. They're doing it because they put their heart and soul into it. And like any job, you put your heart and soul, and you put the work in, it pays off. So in order to get on late night television, well, right nowadays it's very different. When I was a kid, there was only the Johnny Carson show, and he would put comedians on and break their careers in a great way. And if you did his show and he liked you, you had a career the next day. But now there's cable television and the internet, and there's so many places. Like when the Tonight Show was on TV, you had to turn on the TV at that time, or else you didn't see the show. They didn't really have a VCR or anything like that, so you had to watch the show when it happened. And when I was working the Letterman show, there was the show with Jay Leno, there was Conan O'Brien, there was Jon Stewart on the Daily Show. So in that era, it was great to be a guest on Letterman, but it wasn't like when you did the Johnny Carson show. So you try to find the comedians that fit the style of the host. It's like if you get a job writing for the Bob Newhart show, you have to write in the voice of Bob Newhart. And the same
Right.
thing with Letterman. I had to find the people because he liked them very, smart and silly kind of combination. So that's why we had people like Jake Johansson or Jim Gaffigan on, Brian Regan on all the time, because, they were smart and silly. Caroline Ray, and those were people that were on every year. Because that was the kind of comedy Letterman loved. So you book through with a host. Now, as far as how to get on a show, again, it's who you know. But if you're really good, people will find you. The way I found a lot of comedians was through other comedians. Like, a comedian would go on the road and they'd have somebody open up for them. And all of a sudden they would be like, Eddie, you got to see this comedian. She was amazing. And then I'd look at the comedian, and then we try to put a set together for television. And then, it's a process, but it works. You have to have people you can trust in any job.
And what do you say your, like when you worried, what do you say your nervous comedians, like before the show? I know how good you are, to calming me down and make me feel good about myself. And I took a class with you, and the jokes you recommended. You basically wrote my routine for me, my set, and it was the funniest set ever. So I did it very well. But tell us more, like how you calm yourself to go on the, because
For me, I would, do some like deep breathing and just calm my, whole body down, because I wasn't nervous. It was more adrenaline that was flowing through my body at such a high pace that I wanted to calm my nervous system down so that I could really be myself and have a good time and relax, because that's the key. If you're having fun, the audience is having fun. The audience is nervous for you when you're not that famous, and you come out there, they hope that you do well, so they want that kind of happiness. So a lot of times people are nervous. I mean, it's natural. 5 million people are going to see you do this set, including your parents, who you want their approval. And so the key, I would tell comedians, I would say, look, you're not doing I'm not doing you a favor. You earned the spot, so go out on to the audience and show them what you do. And if you show them what you do, and with confidence, not cockiness, but if you have a nice confidence, the audience it's very alluring to see that kind of confidence in people. And the other part is not being afraid to show your vulnerability, which is really one of the keys in comedy. Not for everybody, but for most comics, it all comes down to vulnerability being a strength. And a lot of comedians will just shit on people and just constantly put people down and all that kind of stuff. And it's not that exciting. It's got to come back every once in a while to bite you in the ass.
Yeah, there are comedians, the people afraid of sitting in the first row because some comedians just using that for,
But there's some very good people. Paula,
yeah.
the best I've ever seen working with people, and the people in the front row were never nervous to be in her crowd because she was having fun with them. But someone who just comes out on stage and just shits on people with no heart. The thing about Don Rickles, he would just lambaste people, but you knew that the foundation was a big heart, and also the knowledge and the wherewithal that we're all the same here, and it's just easy to make fun of that. And so that to me has always been the strength. And also there's no just one comedian. If you had told every comedian they had to get a certain amount of jokes and punchlines and a certain amount of minutes, which happens, where you need 12 laughs in 15 minutes or something, that kind of stuff. Well, we would never have Andy Kaufman, or we would never have Lily Tomlin, or we wouldn't, if you create something that's unique and original to you, well, that's special. Some people would say to me, managers or agents would call me and say, I have, the next Sarah Silverman. And I'd say, well, maybe I should book Sarah Silverman because, why would I want the next of something? I want an original person, and I want to be an original person. And that's when you can be your most authentic self, then that's really that's always I can't say always, but 99% the key.
So now the show's over,
Mhm.
and what are you up to?
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because, I never was angry that I had to not be able to, I would work at least 4 days a week every week for 42 weeks a year. And it was a lot of responsibility, but with that, I couldn't travel all over the world, even though I would go like on our big breaks. I'd go to Australia and I'd go to Bangladesh and I'd go to all these cool, odd places to do comedy. It was odd because it was not a place I ever thought I'd be. And but once the Letterman show was over, now I had the freedom to go other places for longer. And then I started working on scripts and I started working on voiceovers, and I've done so many other kinds of things. So it's,
And I know you teach comedy right now.
yeah, again, I teach it, but I workshop it. Like I know.
Where they can find you and how, and take your class because I'm recommending it very much.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I do these workshops where we all get together and we deconstruct comedy in a way and look at it in a way, and we see ourselves when we're looking at other people, we project ourselves onto other people, and it's just it's a really truthful experience, very honest, and serious but fun, and so right now I've been doing it often at the West Side Comedy Club in New York City, and I also do it in other cities that I visit. I try all over the world. I've done it in Ireland and Australia and England, all over, and I enjoy it. I enjoy the back and forth with comedians. But you can always reach me, at Instagram at Eddie Comic, EDDIE COMIC, and you can ask me any questions you have about what you would need to do for the workshop, or how you want to start out. I get, there's a lot of young comedians that contact me through their parents or through their cousins or whatever. And I just, I don't mind. I actually enjoy helping young comedians and letting them know that it's really worthwhile to stick it out, because I've been doing it 39 years in a row. I've done it longer, but then I quit. And then I started again 39 years ago. And I had people who did that for me. Many people took me in under their wing and helped me. So I do that often. I'm working with, 3 or 4 very young comedians who, some of them have just started getting on stage for the first time, and just letting them know that it's worth every good and bad thing that comes along with it. Because if you love something, like there's this friend of mine's a comedian, and her daughter's turning 18 very soon. And I told her daughter, I said, look, when I was 18, I started in an improv and sketch group, and with all these people who are my friends still to this day. It's a really good time right now to take chances and try to do the things you love. And if it doesn't work out, at least you took the chance and gave it your all.
Do you see any difference, like when you started as a comedian and now? Do you think it's easier to get recognition, or still like networking is the most important thing?
If you shoot to be famous, you could become famous. You could rob a bank and become famous. For me, it's the hard work and the creativity that I get the thrill out of. And if you become famous or known or whatever, that's a byproduct of the hard work that you put in. So I don't look at it like, how can I be famous? Because you could do that. You could say, well, look, if I can get 1 million followers online, I'm gonna, show my ass on TikTok, and then all of a sudden, now you have 1 million followers. I mean, it's not that hard, but to be a really talented performer, comedian, and we didn't have the internet when I started doing stand up. So we didn't have a place for the stuff to really travel all over the world. Immediately, you had to go to the other places or be on a television show that appeared in England or in Ireland or something like that. So that's the big difference. But now that we have the internet, people taking advantage of it, and it's smart. It's a good idea to do. Use the tools that you have. But again, to me, there's nothing like going on stage in a crowd with four walls and a microphone and a crowd of people and just enjoying themselves together, and put a velvet rope around the room. We're all VIPs and we're going to have a fun time, just looking at the oddities of life and look at the ironies and what makes me laugh and what pisses me off and what do I find ironic and what's my truth. And that's really the key I've learned, is to find out what my truth is, and not to try to please everyone, which is impossible. I used to want to please everybody, but it's literally impossible to do that. Even the greatest comedians of all time had people who didn't like what they did, so you can't. I learned from watching like Dave Chappelle that you just tell your truth. And I learned
And
from
you
George.
worked with Dave back then, right? You told me that you booked him a few times and he was on
Yeah,
the show. And
yeah, it's and to see that he told his truth, and he was not gonna really listen to other people telling him how to do what he did. And people have said to me, oh, I saw Dave Chappelle's show and I didn't like this. I go, well, he's not here to please you. And if you don't like it, you change the channel or wait a little bit. There might be a joke that you do like, down the road. But, we're not here. People, I've said it out loud in the audience. Some lady yelled out once, and I said, look, I'm not here to please you. If, this is my perspective, and, you might not agree, but that's your right. You don't have to agree. I'm not here to try to convince you to enjoy my perspective. Just take a look and see what it is. If it's different than yours, then see what you like about yours. And the key is really, again, it's about telling your truth. And then and then and have fun and look at life in a different angle. And I think that's what comedians mostly do, because we're warped and we look in that warped way.
so what do you consider to be the most valuable lesson you learned in the comedy industry?
Just to get on stage. In the years I wasn't working at Letterman, I would get on stage between 500 and 600 shows a year. And I'd run all over the place, working on material, working on shows, running from here to here, and putting the work in. And that really was the most valuable lesson. Get on stage, like I said earlier, and put the work in. Like if I had a night where I had 7 or 8 shows, I can come with a new joke idea at the beginning, and through the different shows I do in the night, I add, subtract, until I've molded something that I liked, or throw it away because it didn't work, or put it on the side, maybe to work one day.
Thank you very much.
I'm talking to you,
Thank
especially
you.
about we share the same love.
Thank you. And speak soon.